There are millions of acres of opportunity out there. They belong to you. Every day, decisions are being made that affect your land, your water, your wildlife. You should know about them. This is your mountain. Well, hello, everybody. One more time, welcome to the Your Mountain podcast. I am your host, David Wilms, and I've got with me, again, not still here, finally back, Nephi Cole.
You know, with all the smack talk from you, you're lucky that I showed up. But I did tag your car.
It probably could use it. Probably makes it look better.
Sure.
It's starting to get old.
It started to get old a long time ago, my friend.
Just like you.
Yeah, it's like that old, only not a classic.
Yeah, you're not a classic either. Also, as usual, Mike McGrady.
Hey, what's up, man?
How are you doing?
Never been better.
Yeah?
Yeah, I listened to our last episode. I thought it was awesome. And I talked to Eric, and he's like, oh, I forgot this one point. And so he wanted me to communicate out that when we were talking to him about, and if you didn't hear his last episode, you gotta go check it out. The wildlife attorney is pretty good. But he said part of the reason why we can trust that the DOJ attorneys are so ready to get in there and put their own biases aside and get ready to go is because they're all type A attorneys, and so they want to get in and win regardless of their own personal feelings. So just thought I'd throw that in there for Eric. He wanted to make sure that point was getting across. Yeah,
I think that's consistent with every DOJ attorney I've met. That's
yeah,
a
right.
Fair characterization.
Yeah. So, and if you have no idea what I'm talking about, go back and listen to the episode.
Yeah, I just listened to it too. I really enjoyed that episode. The only thing that would have made it better is if Nephi had been able to be part of it. But we had a good laugh at his expense early on. And,
yeah, it still hurts.
I know. So before we jump in, just really quick, a quick reminder to all of our listeners out there. The feedback we get from you is everything. I mean, it matters. It matters a lot. We're going to talk about some things today that are a direct result of feedback we've received from some of you. So if you have ideas for podcasts, if you have things that you'd like to hear us discuss, if you have critiques of what we've already discussed, head out and send us an email at yourmountain@itsyourmountain.com. And while you're at it, out there on the internet, why don't you subscribe to this podcast? Give us a rating, leave us a comment, tell some friends about it, help get the word out. We'd really appreciate it a lot. And follow us on social media, all the usual places, with the tag @itsyourmountain. And now, like I said, we got a message recently from somebody named Mike who wanted us to talk about a bill that was running through the North Dakota legislature, that was had the ability to affect sportsmen. And so we got to talking and said, well, maybe we should do something a little broader. Let's talk about that, but let's do a little survey of what's going on. A lot of legislatures are in session around the country right now, and let's do a little survey about what's going on in places all over the country. So we've cherry-picked a few of these places and some of these big issues. We're not going to take a deep dive into them by any means. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on, public policy in Maryland or Maine or Pennsylvania or Idaho, but we can at least raise some awareness of some of the issues that are going on in some of your states, and issues that are going on in other states that you might not be familiar with. I think it's good as the hunting community to know what's going on at the local level that are going to be impacting your decisions. So we're going to do that. Today so you're listening to this on a Tuesday, but we're actually recording this on a Sunday evening, which we frequently do. We get together and record these things pretty late at night. It's like a red-eye flight for podcasting, right? So we're recording this as a Sunday evening. Guess what I was doing earlier today, guys?
I'm going to say, let's see, you were ironing old used Garbage bags, so you could reuse them. Does that?
No, an iron would melt those garbage bags.
I can't think of anything.
Yeah, so I was waterfowl hunting. I was goose hunting.
That was my next guess.
I was goose hunting on a Sunday in Wyoming. And why would that matter? Why would I bring that up? Certainly wasn't because the hunting was good. I had a not a very productive
because
morning.
you're a heathen and that's your church.
It is sort of my church. But I'm bringing it up because Sunday hunting, the ability to hunt waterfowl or something else on a Sunday, it's an issue in several states still.
Yeah, it's something we take for granted, isn't it?
It is.
We're out here, we're
just used to it.
In hunting central, we just assume that you can hunt whatever, wherever, whenever.
You can hunt on Sunday in God's country.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So it's really interesting to hear somebody say we can't go hunting on Sunday. You go, what? Why not? Is your mom mad at you?
Right. And there's something like 8 states still that have some type of restriction for hunting on Sundays. But at least 2 of them are taking steps to address that this year. And I know you've been following at least one of them pretty closely.
Yeah, a number of them. So there's a number of folks in different states who I work with have been working on the Sunday hunting issue. So Pennsylvania, I think, is kind of exciting because they have such a huge hunting population. And they have, over, literally centuries of tradition in the law that doesn't allow, most hunting on Sundays. And so any effort to change the needle on that is a big needle that has the capacity to affect a whole lot of people and to provide, if think about it, if you're a dad who's going to take your son out for a deer hunt, when do you take them? You probably take them on the weekend if they're going to school. And so now, depending on how long your season is, when somebody takes away half the days in your season, that's kind of a big deal.
And it's always been that way. No, you just
always
haven't known any different.
Yep.
Now, I think for Pennsylvania, it's worth noting that you can hunt for things like crows and fur bearers, things like coyotes, on Sundays. But what's the most popular? At least
big game, right?
Yeah, and which one? It'd be white-tailed deer.
White-tailed deer, and across the U.S., that is the case. When you look at, people talk a lot about hunting opportunities and who gets those opportunities, when and where. But big game's really where it's at. That's what really, moves the needle in terms of the economics, in terms of the numbers of people. That's, there are certainly other great opportunities that are out there. Turkey hunting's awesome. Upland game hunting's awesome. But big game's where it's at.
So the bill, as I understand it, it would lift the ban, and it would actually allow the Fish and Game or Game and Fish Commission in Pennsylvania to make a decision about whether or not to allow hunting on Sunday. It doesn't automatically. This bill doesn't automatically say, okay, hunting's going to occur on Sundays, but it at least lifts the prohibition and allows the commission to weigh in and make a determination about whether Sunday hunting should be allowed. And it's been something that, if I remember this right, there's been a push for a change like this for about 20 years. I mean, people have been pushing for a while, and it gets held up. And I think it just finally got out of committee in Pennsylvania. So it's not a done deal yet. We'll have to see what happens. There's another interesting thing tied to that bill. So they tacked on a piece to that bill that would take hunting-related trespass fines and direct those fines to things like CWD management and research and other wildlife-related programs. And I think that's part of the bill. Part of the way of trying to build some more bipartisan support is having some of these trespass issues dealt with as well in the bill. But I know you're going to continue to watch that, and watch.
I have a friend who's going to continue to watch it. Those aren't my areas.
But you'll
yeah.
You have a friend that'll
East
watch
Coast.
it, and you'll hear from that friend.
You
right?
bet.
And so at some point when we hear what happens, we'll try and pass that information along through our social media pages. But there's another one going on in Maryland as well, right?
That's right. I think that Maryland. Where's my notes?
You're supposed to know all this stuff.
I know, but so Maryland is got a couple of them. There's upland game, or there's 2 different bills in Maryland.
Not upland game.
down.
Yeah.
No.
So it's it would address whitetail and migratory birds.
That's right.
Right.
It's migratory birds.
So the idea is to allow. Right now, I think the law in Maryland, it prohibits hunting whitetail deer on Sundays on public land. You're allowed to do it on private land, but not public. And this bill would allow you to hunt whitetails on public land as well, and it would open up waterfowl hunting on all lands on Sundays.
Yeah, the first test for Maryland is going to be the Tuesday this episode comes out, right? It's the first committee
the
hearing.
12th of
February, right. So that's
Yep.
when the migratory bird bill is going to come up, the Senate Bill 293. So that might be an indication of what's going to happen the following Tuesday with the big game Senate Bill 390.
So, I think these are worth knowing about. So many of us come from these states where we've just always been able to hunt on Sundays. And to know that there are still states out there that are grappling with this issue about, whether to allow it and the reasons not to allow it. Originally, I think it was rooted in Sunday's a day of rest, some religious roots for not having hunting on Sunday. And it's maybe over time morphed into more of a public safety reasons for not having it on Sunday, or at least that's some of the argument, right?
Yeah, I mean, you look at the groups, for example, Pennsylvania, those folks who are opposed to it include groups like other outdoor recreational uses. And so, Humane, I think it's called Humane Pennsylvania or something like that. So you get these groups out there who are, putting up their messaging about it, and they'll say, this is about sharing the woods and it's about safety. And I think from the hunter's perspective, you'd agree it is about sharing the woods. And then on the safety concerns, I think that people don't realize how safe hunting is. And I think that there's a perception out there in the public that doesn't know about hunting that it's, somehow unsafe.
I've never felt uncomfortable in the woods during hunting season on public lands when I wasn't hunting and I knew there were hunters out there, or when I was hunting and there are other hunters out there. I've never been in a position where I've felt uncomfortable on public lands.
Well, the reality is you're much more like when you start ranking ways that you're going to potentially get hurt, recreational activities, and I mean, this is any kind of injury. Hunting is way down there below basketball, baseball, soccer, tennis.
Oh man, I get injured all the time playing basketball.
Dude,
it's ridiculous.
That's because of the people we play with.
I know.
Walking around, it's
when I walk out of the door to play basketball,
you get hurt.
No.
He gets a lecture.
I get a lecture. My family says, "Have fun, don't get hurt." Those are the two sentences uttered as I walk out the door every time I play basketball.
No.
So that's a high risk activity.
No, hunting is hunting is a low risk activity, and people. That's the thing. There's a perception out there that because, I don't know what the perception is. People just who have never done it, I don't think have a picture of what it's really like, and so you'd have to ask them. But I'm guessing they think this thing's some kind of like, guys, shooting things over each other's heads or something. It's just no perception of what the reality is on the ground.
So let's move in from the coast a little bit. Actually, we don't have to move far. Let's just move to a bordering state of Pennsylvania and touch on another issue. So there's a bill. So in New York, Senate Bill 2968. Did you know this? So did you know that New York, to hunt big game, it has the highest minimum age restriction of any state in the country? And so I'm not suggesting
what a shocker.
I'm not. I was kind of surprised.
New York?
Look, I was actually kind of surprised by it. The minimum hunting age for big game in New York right now is 14, and I'm sure there are other states out there. I haven't looked. I'm sure there are other states out there that are also 14, but 14 is the highest number I can find for minimum age to hunt. Most states have been dropping that.
And when you say minimum age to hunt, is it
big game? I should
big
say.
game.
Sorry,
Okay.
big game.
Yeah.
And many states have been dropping that number, and
a lot east of the Mississippi, it's been especially popular.
Right.
To drop or even remove.
In fact, we talked about this,
Yeah.
and I got to put in a little. I go back a couple of podcasts. We were talking about this very thing, right? Age limits on hunting, and we talked about Wisconsin a little bit, and I was pointing out how my thought was there.
Is this the I was right?
Well,
moment for Dave?
no, this is we
like
had, look,
if somebody validated something he said, it doesn't matter who it was or how long ago. He's gonna find that validation.
I'm
Let's hear
not-
it.
No, but he's going to bring it up.
Yeah. I don't want to have to tell you all that I'm right, but I am just sick of
I'm just
being
saying,
right.
I did not. I
Just
don't want
sick
to
of
go
it.
back and say how right I am. But we had a listener. We had a listener that sent us an email, and I
mean-
want to thank you, Kyle, for sending in this message because it allows me an opportunity to rib Nephi a little bit.
I'm tired of it. I really am. Being right is hard.
Yeah, no.
I mean, people-
Thanks, Kyle.
Yeah, I mean it with true appreciation and gratitude and no sarcasm.
Kyle,
I'm surrounded by people here. That's
You need to spend less time typing.
I thought it was a great email. What he was doing was he was pointing out that, yes, as a matter of fact, in Wisconsin, there is no age limit. And in fact, a person could theoretically apply for their 3-year-old, do the application form to get a whitetail tag. And, I guess it becomes, at what point does the red flag go up? That
You're wondering
that
at
this
what
person might
point should
be
you
too-
start breaking the law? Because I'm just saying, that's the funny part. You're like,
I know.
someplace, some guy could buy a machine gun for his, or whatever. Like the reality is if something's against the law, it's against the law, and we should respect that people are going to
But
obey
that-
the law.
that
We shouldn't
law
think
has-
worst case scenario for every person around us. Like, man, if Mike gets a Charger that's got 500 horsepower, he's going to drop the hammer on that thing and go 180 at least once.
Look, all I was pointing out is that there could be, and apparently have been, opportunities for
Drop the hammer.
3-year-olds to purchase whitetail deer licenses in Wisconsin.
Do you think?
I'm not saying that's.
Do you think that 3-year-old filled that tag?
Look, I don't know. I don't know the answer.
I
to that.
think you do know the answer to that.
Well, we live in a
The
world
answer is
where
no.
Yeah, we live in a world where that's a possibility.
Right.
And there's also a possibility that 3-year-old has a credit card.
Right.
So,
But I digress. I just wanted to point it up
The
the scenario we were describing a couple
Oh.
podcasts ago is factually accurate in Wisconsin. That could happen.
I
Right.
appreciate truthful information.
But now let's move on to New York, where what they're really proposing in
Please,
the Senate Bill 2968.
Someone send in a new conspiracy theory for Dave in your next email so that we can hear about.
Anyway, so they're it's not a conspiracy theory. Anyway, so that New York's proposed dropping the age limit from
If
14,
you ran a daycare,
14
could
to 12.
Oh, go ahead.
So they're proposing dropping the age limit for big game in New York from 14 to 12.
You bet.
That's the bill that's out there, right?
Which is a good bill.
And Wyoming had a similar bill this legislative session.
It did.
And
Is 12 a common age bracket for states?
it is for big game. It's a 10 and 12.
Even
are-
numbers tend to be very popular.
Right.
So
There aren't a lot of states that
12
say
and
you have to be
14
11.
No, and it's kind of interesting because
Well,
you would ask
11
yourself why.
Yeah, well, 11 would typically be like a 6th grader, so
Right.
junior high in some places.
Yeah.
So,
So anyway, so
Well, what's the point of
Wyoming's-
the restriction?
Wyoming's was to just really quickly. Wyoming's I said had something similar. Theirs
right.
was actually to drop from 12 to 10.
That's right, for
as
big game.
opposed for big game as opposed to New York's, which is 14 to 12.
Yeah.
and that was this session.
That was this session and
Yeah.
it failed.
And it was interesting to hear the debate about it. It passed through committee fairly easily. So the committee made it through committee with a vote where 6-3, I believe was where it was. But the dissenting voice on that was a gentleman who was a former game warden, and I don't know the way to say it. He's seasoned, so he's been around a long time. And so his thought on it was once upon a time, and he was in the woods and ran into, and this is back when the hunting age was, probably when he was 14, but he was in the woods and he found a kid whose parents just left the guy running all by himself. And so then his testimony on this bill is, you can't do this because you're going to have, because I found a lost child once running around the woods scared, and we're going to have lost children everywhere running around the woods scared. So,
So you just have some education to do on that one.
yeah, and that's the thing that people need to understand is I think that a lot of people, that's the assumption when these age bills come up. The thought is that these are bills that are encouraging. Again, it's they picture a youth in the field by themselves. That's just not the case. Most of these are mentor bills, and they require a guardian.
Well, I mean, I think to my own. I have a 10-year-old. I
Yeah.
think to my own 10-year-old, right? And if she had a big game big game license, would I turn her loose in
You
the
can't.
woods? No.
You legally can't do it, and you never could. And that's where these arguments. Unfortunately, it's really popular now. Look around. Everybody brings up this scenario and they say, like the 3-year-old that you brought up. Everybody goes, well, what if this happens and somebody breaks the law by doing this, and look at this terrible thing? What you have to say is that's not the way the law works. If everybody's obeying the law the way it's written, these far-fetched scenarios that you're bringing up, they don't apply. They only apply if you're assuming that people are breaking the law somehow.
They do apply, but they apply to a very, very small
Dave,
percentage
I don't want you to.
No,
I don't want you to
listen.
feel like you're not right. So we don't need to keep arguing.
No,
on
I'm
this.
saying,
I want you to be right.
I think where. I mean, they do apply, right? But it's such a small segment of the population that's going to break the law. That's why you have penalties, and that's why you have folks out there enforcing it. And you don't penalize the majority for the sins of the minority.
You also don't. Yeah, I mean, you're right, but I don't know where the.
Well,
yeah.
Wait a second.
I'm lost by what.
You're speechless.
All right, let's keep going.
No, you're speechless.
I'm taking a drink, Dave,
All
because
right.
I don't want to waste my time trying to argue with you. Because arguing with you about any point is like
It's pointless.
it's pointless because
I think we actually agree on this is the thing, and you just
Dave,
don't
I'm
want
so
to
hesitant
admit,
to agree with you.
You just don't want to admit that you agree. I think that's where we are.
I disagree.
You disagree that you.
No, I'd love to agree with you, but I can't.
All right.
That's what I'm saying.
So let's touch on a couple other things here. So we got a few more I want to run through, and we'll run through them pretty fast. For example, in Connecticut, in the state of Connecticut, Senate Bill 586 is floating out there, which would authorize a black bear hunt in Litchfield County. Now, for some proponents of this, there have been a lot more black bear encounters in Connecticut, a lot more in the thousands over the course of a year.
I presume in Litchfield County.
Yeah, I would assume that'd be one of the big places.
Yeah.
And so this might be a test case for having a broader black bear season in Connecticut. So that one's worth following. Keep an eye on that one, right? Move down to New Mexico. There's a big movement across the West. And in New Mexico, this particular bill, House Bill 366, is just one example. There's a big movement around the West and presumably other parts in the country to restrict or ban trapping. Right. There are a number of groups that are morally or ethically opposed to trapping. Well, there's a bill in New Mexico, and we're not going to weigh in on the pros and cons of trapping. We're just pointing this out. There's a bill in New Mexico that would ban certain types of traps, snares, leg holds, for example, on public lands only in New Mexico. I think that one will probably be a fairly controversial bill. It'll stir up some lively debate. It's not going to be unique to New Mexico. There are going to be other examples in other states taking on these trapping issues. So keep watching for that. In Idaho, for example, House Bill 80 is out there, and it would direct sportsmen's dollars to pay for wildlife damage caused to irrigation equipment. I don't know exactly what all is encompassed in irrigation equipment or what the issues are behind it. Why this somehow became, bubbled up and became necessacary for
why it percolated to the surface. Yeah.
Bubbled up.
Okay.
I was trying to come up with the appropriate pun.
I can't imagine either. I know I've gone through Idaho in the past and have seen their irrigation where it's long PVC pipe just spread on the ground, and then there's sprinklers shooting up from it rather than a center pivot where the irrigation stuff is elevated above the ground. So I don't know. Maybe
hand lines, my friend, hand lines.
Yeah, maybe they're
talking to a guy who spent a lot of time moving.
Yeah, the question is
pipe around a potato
field.
The question is
hand lines, that's what it's called.
What kind of wildlife is damaging? And I haven't looked into it enough to know what kind of wildlife is damaging it. What type of damage is occurring?
Yeah.
How much of an economic impact it's really causing? But it's raised enough interest that it's something that's talked about. And when you have a finite resource of these wildlife, these sportsmen's dollars going to manage wildlife, it's anytime you're talking about putting funds somewhere, it's it's worthy of analysis and having a conversation about.
Yeah.
And so if you're in Idaho listening to this, keep an eye on HB 80 and see where that goes. Another one. Let's bounce all the way up to the extreme northeast in Maine, the state of Maine. They have a lot of white-tailed deer. They have a lot of white-tailed deer, and they're looking at opportunities for how do they start better managing and controlling those whitetail populations. And so they're floating 2 bills right now that would allow hunting deer over bait. Now, there are a lot of states that allow hunting deer over bait, and there are a lot of states that don't. And that's a pretty heavily debated, ethical question in the hunting community about where that falls in the hunter ethics spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
I don't intend to weigh in on that.
That's good.
Just saying.
That's fine.
Just
But I've heard Maine is, while it has some tremendous animals to hunt, is not an easy state to hunt in.
Right, and we actually got some feedback from a listener on that.
Yeah.
And so we're going to try and dive into Maine and some other eastern states in a more detailed podcast here in the future.
Suffice it to say for now that the baiting might be one of the only ways to really kind of address the issue.
Right.
In order to bring the animals to where the hunters are, as opposed to kind of allowing them to go out and encounter them in a different scenario.
It's an access issue. It could be an access issue in Maine, right? I'd be interested to hear feedback from folks on that particular topic.
Mm-hmm.
But every state has different reasons for allowing it. Wyoming, for example, mostly does not allow baiting of deer. However, there are 2 instances that I can think of where it's allowed, and it's in places where there are significant overpopulations of white-tailed deer.
Yes.
And it's only allowed, you can bait, but you can only hunt does over the bait, and it has to be in these areas where there's significant resource damage and overpopulation.
Sure.
And they're really trying to get deer down to management objectives.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's an
that makes
interesting
sense.
variation. I think it's worth talking about. I think that when people look at you get into some of these discussions about hunting and about methods and things, everybody brings their personal perspective. You base it on where you're from and the reasons that you hunt and why you hunt this certain way. And I think that's what makes it tough, because when you look at the purpose, what's the purpose for allowing hunting for deer? Well, it's not the same. It's not so that some guy can, it's different here than in Iowa, where if you're a tree stand hunter there, you're saying, well, that's not fair to call deer in here and to shoot them with a bow. Well, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a need to control population number, and you're talking about hunting as a tool to control population. And that's different. And that's what we lose in many of these discussions about, well, is this okay to hunt this way or to hunt that way? Or what about this guy? What about that guy? You're losing the regional specificity and the need for people. For those game and fish agencies, you're not understanding the reason why they decided to allow that type of management there, and so don't be too judgmental until you know why they're doing it.
Sound advice. I think I agree with you. See, I'm willing to say I agree with you, Nephi.
I'm
just waiting for you to. I want to hear those words out of your mouth at some point.
Well, Dave, I agree. That would be nice.
Yeah, I know. We'll see. There you go. I'll take whatever I can get, even if it's a sarcastic, snarky remark. So two more issues that I want to touch on in this episode. So one, there are a couple of states, and I think you're going to see a push on this in more than a couple of states. I think this is going to be a big push. The Humane Society of the United States is behind this push, and it is an effort to start banning and criminalizing wildlife hunting contests. So in Wisconsin,
I thought you were going to say adopting dogs at first, but it's unfortunate that it's the other.
Yeah, so in Wisconsin right now and in Oregon right now, there are bills that look largely the same, which
strange how that works
right?
out.
That's when a national organization is behind it and gets some draft
For those of you who
floated.
follow state legislations, you'll find that when some of these bills pop up, like the bill you mentioned in New Mexico, they pop up as near mirror images in a large number of states at once.
Right. So they found willing sponsors for these bills in Wisconsin and Oregon. And the argument behind this, and we're talking any kind of contest, participating, helping promote, helping organize, any contest that has where you're taking an animal or attempting to take an animal for prizes or entertainment is really the way it's phrased. It could be criminalized, right? And it's
any animal.
Does it include bass?
Hunting. Not it it specifically doesn't include fishing
because fish don't have feelings.
Game species, right?
Fish don't have feelings.
That's why I asked.
Yeah. So birds and mammals, right?
Okay.
So the Humane Society's main effort is in particular behind predator hunting events. And, I know there are heated thoughts on both sides of the aisle about that. But I also point out that if a bill like this passes, and so I personally have participated in events, competitions. I participate frequently in what we call the two-shot goose hunt, where you get, as it sounds, 2 shots for geese. Now, you can use a third and fourth shot if you were to injure one and you need to kill that bird.
The idea is to see how many geese you can get with 2 shots.
But it's how many geese you can get with 2 shots, right? And
the answer should never be 3.
Well, it could be.
It's possible. It's possible.
Yeah.
But my point is, I participate in this event, which raises literally hundreds of thousands of dollars for wetland conservation for migratory birds.
Yeah,
that's what it is. And you kill the geese. I get them. I eat them. Right, just like everybody does. It's a hunt. It's any kind of hunt I would have done, except I'm limiting myself to 2 shots, and I'm paying money to enter into this contest. And can you win shotguns at the end and other kinds of prizes if you have the biggest bird, or collectively you and a teammate each get 2 birds. Yeah, there are prizes, but the idea behind that particular competition is to promote conservation and to raise money for conservation of the very species that you're out there hunting.
Yeah. Almost every state has something like this, and if your state doesn't, be the guy to make it happen, because they're pretty neat. Kansas has a governor's pheasant hunt. I mean, there's a deer hunt in Georgia.
But the point is, these types of hunts wouldn't be allowed under Wisconsin's and Oregon's bills, as I understand those bills. And watch your states closely, because if these bills are being introduced in Oregon and Wisconsin, they're going to be introduced in other states too. It's just a matter of time. Yeah. And so you need to have your radar up on that stuff. So that's that one. And the last one I really wanted to talk about, and I'm saving this. I'm viewing this one as the best for last, and this is because this is the one that our listener Mike in.
I know, Mike. You were waiting. We were too. We were waiting for him to get to it.
Right. So this is from our listener Mike. He sent us an email from North Dakota, and he posed a question about Senate Bill 2315 in North Dakota, and wanted us to talk about it a little bit. So 2315 fundamentally changes the dynamic in North Dakota on how trespass and access are dealt with on private lands. So currently, the law, as I understand it in North Dakota, for hunting, not hunting any kind of access to private land, it is the landowner's responsibility to post their land, to post their property boundaries, to post no trespassing. Right.
So if you don't want somebody coming, it's your responsibility to basically fence out.
That's right.
To have the signage and have people to keep them out.
Right. And so if you don't do that, then people...
If there's nothing that says that it's yours and I don't want you here, you get to go there.
Then you get to go there,
yep.
and you can hunt there.
Yep.
And that's been the practice in North Dakota for a long, long, long time. And North Dakota has, as a lot of folks know, it's primarily private land. Overwhelming majority of the land in North Dakota is privately held. And so this, at least the way the law worked, it was viewed by many hunters and anglers as a way to gain access to places to hunt and, in particular to hunt, right? So the proposed change in the law that SB 2315 would do is it would shift the burden, right? So it would no longer be the responsibility of the landowner to post if they didn't want you on there. It is the responsibility of the hunter to seek permission from the landowner before entering.
Isn't this very interesting? Because this is almost a situation where you have to look at technology that we have and how great it is that we have access. Everybody's got a GPS unit now. Mm-hmm. There's a really big chance that it's thanks to these advances in technology that have given us the ability to find access to new places that now, when you go and you tell me, if you were to say like, well, why should I have to know? You say, what are you talking about? You have a
You
GPS.
legitimately know where you are all the time.
Yeah, you know where you are all the time. Why should you get to trespass? You know you're on my land.
Well, so the arguments, as you imagine, from the landowner community in North Dakota are this is a private property rights issue.
Sure.
I own this property. I should be able to control access to this property, and I should, I shouldn't have to post, because what if somebody tears a sign down, for example, and then comes in and says, well, I never saw a sign, and how do you prove that they tore the sign down? Yeah. Right. So that's an issue that landowners are grappling with, and public safety, they want to know who's out there and when they're out there. They want to be able to control access, and from a landowner rights standpoint, you can understand where they're coming from.
Well, there are a lot of states you see liability laws that are being developed at the same time, because a lot of people in these states have been sued because somebody was on their property
and got
hurts themselves, and so then they've gone after the property owner, and so you can understand the argument coming from the other direction, saying
the flip side of the argument from the hunting community, they're saying, look, this is something we've always had. We've had this access, and now it's being turned on its head. And what if I don't know how to get a hold of this landowner? What if I can never connect with this landowner and I can't get that permission? It becomes so difficult. It becomes burdensome. I just won't go out. And so now I might not hunt. And now I might not take the next generation hunting. And so the argument is this has the ability to impact hunter recruitment and retention, by changing the way this law works in North Dakota.
And know that, your own paradigm is going to look different depending on what state we're talking to. And in many states, Wyoming, for example, is one of them, you already have that responsibility. You cannot trespass.
That's been the law for a while. Well, so what this North Dakota law would do, this change, would, for the most part, mirror Wyoming. So Wyoming had, and they may have changed I don't know if they changed it recently or not, but let's back up 5 years because I don't want to get it wrong. 5 years ago, at least, in Wyoming, it was fence out state. Landowner had to post, except for hunting. There was a separate hunting statute that said if you were hunting or attempting to hunt or crossing someplace to hunt in the act of, it was your responsibility to know where you were. It was not there was no posting requirement. So it's basically the same law that North Dakota is grappling with right now. We've had for a while, and Idaho just passed a similar law went into effect in 2018.
Yeah, because I believe Idaho was different. I believe that Idaho previously, it was the duty. Idaho was one of those states where you didn't, if they didn't post it, you're good.
Right. It was like North Dakota's is today, right? Is how Idaho's. So Idaho took it a step further. So they changed it to where you had to know where you were, but if you're hunting and you're hunting on that private land without permission, and you get a ticket for that, if it's a hunting trespass in Idaho, you lose your hunting rights for a full year. In addition to the misdemeanor penalty and the fine, you lose your hunting rights. In North Dakota, it would be, if this bill passes, it would be a fine and a misdemeanor, but you don't lose your hunting rights. And then I believe there's another piece of this this North Dakota bill. And this part I thought was interesting. So the bill still, in its current form, one thing it does do, and I haven't decided how I feel about it because I'm kind of a private property rights guy. I do respect and value private property rights, although I appreciate the opportunity for access. I respect those rights. But there is this provision in North Dakota where and even under the new law, if this law passes, if you are hunting and you're in a place where you're legally allowed to be, you are allowed to be there, and you shoot an animal, and that animal crosses a fence onto private land that you don't have permission to hunt, you can, under this law, legally go and retrieve that game without permission of that landowner. I just find that interesting.
Yeah,
I think that's unique. I haven't. Maybe that law exists other places. I haven't seen that law, and I'd be, if listeners, if that's a law that is in your state, I'd be interested in knowing it.
yeah, and I've heard the argument against that law.
I have too.
Which is, so what happens? Some guy's going to shoot something that's on my place, and then he's going to claim that it jumped the fence and went there.
Right.
And so these are it'd be great if these were
Please say
easy
they're
issues.
challenging issues.
They're challenging issues.
Yes.
It's complicated.
It's complicated. They're challenging
Well,
issues.
they are.
I was hoping you'd get to that in this episode.
Because they are. Because that's the thing that's tough about it. We know a lot of people. Here's the reality, and I'm trying to be as nice as I can about this. People, when you don't have a big ranch, and I don't have a big ranch, when you're young and you're just out of school and you want a place to go hunt, any law that prohibits you from getting there sounds like a really terrible law. But these places that we're talking about, if you think you have a right to roam right across someplace, realize this: that's somebody's. If it was your backyard, you wouldn't feel the same way. If it was your kitchen, you wouldn't feel the same way. And if that's somebody's home, that's somebody's place, that's something that somebody worked for, and so there needs to be that respect of belonging. Well,
I think it's worth watching this one closely, especially for folks in North Dakota. This will be if this goes through, it'll be a pretty big shift in North Dakota. Right? It'll be a big shift. I think it's worth pointing out that about half of the states in the country have this type of notice requirement, right? Requiring the hunter to know where they are and get permission before being there.
You would probably expect to see more becoming that way again, because there's not an excuse anymore.
I don't know. We'll see. But there does seem to be a trend moving that direction, and North Dakota's dealing with it. Idaho recently dealt with it. Wyoming dealt with it a long time ago. I can't remember when that law came on the books, but it's been there as long as I can remember. There are a host of other states that do that as well. Like I said, about half of them, and about the other half, it's the responsibility of the landowner to post. The old fence out concept. So those are really. Those are some of the issues that legislatures are grappling with around the country, and I think we've hit a pretty diverse cross section of states and some of the issues, and you can see some overlapping issues in the states, but some issues that are unique to individual states. But in a lot of ways, each state you're dealing with these issues on a different timeline, but you're all going to address them at some point because things affecting our ability to hunt and the methods used to hunt and the techniques used to hunt, and all that's constantly being debated. And
we didn't even get into the restrictions on firearms.
Right. That'd take 9 podcasts to cover them all. There are just so many.
Yeah, a lot of proposed legislation out there that will impact how you store your guns, how you loan out your guns, how you use your guns, whether you can have guns,
how much you pay for ammunition, how much ammunition you can have.
Yeah.
There's
a lot of that. Yeah, there's a lot of that going on that directly impacts hunter recruitment.
Yeah.
And just general public.
Yeah, when we've talked about some of those, we're not going to talk about those. Yeah. They take too long. The reality is, for these little points that we've talked about some bills that are interesting. The issues that Mike just talked about, those are going to be impactful, immediate, and now, and they're more pressing and more universal than the bills we've talked about.
For some people, for a lot of hunters, certainly, but a lot of these issues in individual states are going to be very impactful, right? They're going to be very. I'll raise for example.
You want to take your big issues.
I'm going to use a point that you've used with me before, not on the air, right?
I'd rather we just.
No. But I don't want to diminish the. If you're saying these aren't impactful, then why do we even talk about these? Why didn't we just spend the whole thing talking about yours?
I got an idea.
No,
If you, the listener, want to hear about those other types of things,
let us know.
speak up. We can do a deep dive into, we can do a similar sort of survey of legislation around the country that do involve those things.
And I don't mean to say that one class of issues. I'm just saying that as sportsmen, we've made the huge mistake in the past as sportsmen and the sportsman's community to believe that we have to choose, and you've heard this before, that there's like one suite of issues that we have to go to for one party, and one suite of issues that we have to go to another, and these issues don't mix. And the challenge of sportsmen is we have to care about all these issues now. You can't just pick one. You have to say, I don't care about trespassing, or I don't care about land
Now you're
issues.
saying it the right way. The way you were saying it before, I don't think was the right way. Now you're saying it the
Dave,
right way. Because what we've because what we've done
contrarian,
here,
it hurts.
No, what we've done here is what we tried to do is pick off diverse issues around the country affecting your ability to hunt in different states, because the cumulative impact of all of these is very, very significant. And you add on the firearms bills you're talking about, and it just adds to the significance and the impact of this.
As somebody, if you value the hunting, fishing culture, the shooting culture in this country, you have to stay up on these issues, because ultimately
all of these issues.
And the other thing you have to do, and this is why the private lands piece becomes so important. I will tell you the biggest issue for access, why we have to be very careful as sportsmen. When we get into this access piece and this trespassing piece, if the agricultural community suddenly becomes your enemy, as a hunter, we don't have enough friends, and we need all the friends we can get. We need all the support we can get.
70%, and we've said it before, 70% of all land in the United States is privately held.
Yeah.
If we're going to effectively manage wildlife, and if we're going to have and protect a hunting heritage and culture, it has to be a partnership
with ag,
with the agriculture community,
the
landowner community.
Yeah, and the same thing for them. When we have to be advocates, and this is a nice thing, on public lands issues, multi-use lands issues, we can be friends, and we can agree with those folks on that issue. With the outdoor recreation community, we can do the same thing. We can share special places and share the fact that we all care about public lands. And as sportsmen, we've talked about it probably too much on this podcast. What we have to do is get rid of this hyphenated idea of who we are. We have to build coalitions where we are going to support other people's, hobbies and things that they care about, and the reasons that they love to be in the great outdoors, and the way that they make their livings, so that they can also, in turn, we need them to be our friends, and we need them to view us as advocates, because at the end of the day, divide and conquer. There are groups that really don't want to see us out in the woods. There are groups that don't want to see, a lot of different things. There are people that would just as soon nobody goes into a wilderness area ever. Yeah. And so if that's not who we want to be, we need to make sure and build that coalition.
So we've said this a lot on this podcast, or maybe not as much as we should. The reason why we focused on state legislatures here and not what's happening on the federal level is because there's a very real possibility for a lot of, that's where the rubber hits the road, is on the state level. That's where the impact happens. States are more nimble. They pass these laws a lot more easily.
You're going to see these bills passed this year. Yep. Many of these,
and go into effect later this year.
Yeah.
And so
we could talk a lot about the federal stuff,
right? Which could take years or decades for something to move.
This is going to happen in 4 weeks.
This happens in real time.
Yeah.
This happens in real time.
In weeks.
Yes. And so that's why it's leave you with this thought. As you're hearing us talk about these things, just know that we touched on 8 or 9 states maybe right here. There's something going on in all 50 states that are in one way enhancing your ability to hunt, or eroding some of the types and techniques and traditions for hunting. And you need to be aware of those, and you need to engage. And websites are getting more transparent for state legislatures all the time. You can track bills in real time and see where they are. You can read them. You can find contact information for your legislators. You can engage in the process at the local level so easily and have so much impact that I'd leave it with, do that. You should do that. You should, if any of these bills struck a nerve with you or got you fired up or interested, check and see if something like that's going on in your state, or follow up on these bills that we talked about if you live in those states. and really engage in the governing process, the legislating process. Does that summarize why we do this?
I agree, Dave.
Oh man, that's it. That's it. That's where we have to stop. So, Mike, you have anything?
Nope.
All right. Well, thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. Give us your feedback on this. We'd really like to hear it. And in the meantime, remember that life is about experiences, so go have one.